The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Josh Shigala from the Standard.io.
G'day, mates.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Buongiorno, Bitcoiners.
Victoria Jones from Satoshi's Page.
Howdy doody.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one, Microstrategy sells Bitcoin for the first time. We all said it was going to happen, and now it's happened. Although only for tax reasons, Microstrategy sold some Bitcoin and quickly bought it back later. However, their stance as a never sell hodler is now in question now that they've sold for tax reasons. Josh Shigala, what do you think about MicroStrategy selling for the first time?
Man, part of being in Bitcoin, sometimes you got to sell. This whole trope of like hodl, hodl, hodl. Sometimes things come along. I've had to pay for like rental deposits and stuff throughout my time, and it was hundreds of Bitcoin that have gone because of silly stuff that you have to do. But life is life, you just got to spend money when you've got to spend money. It's just what it is.
Dan Eve, is Michael Saylor still your god now that he's sold? Dan is muted. Dan, what do you think about Michael Saylor now that he's sold?
Oh, sorry, my sound cut out. God damn it! Pardon me. Briefly, so I think that's because of someone messaging. But at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. It sounds like it was done for a logical reason, for tax purposes, right? So they had a bit of a loss to be able to net off against against the tax return. So it does sound sensible, but obviously it's coming from Saylor, who's been peddling the never sell sort of thing. So even though they're saying, oh, it's not because we don't trust Bitcoin, the headline is micro, rather than being the logical thing of MicroStrategy sells Bitcoin for tax purposes. It's MicroStrategy sells Bitcoin. So people are going to read the headline and just think, oh no, MicroStrategy are selling Bitcoin, even though their position is higher than it was. I think it's higher than it was in about 3 months ago or something. So they're still holding a very significant amount of Bitcoins. But obviously, but the good thing is that Michael Saylor, although kind of, so he's a bit kind of polarized, as some people are about him. I think ultimately he's kind of, I wouldn't say he's a representative in Bitcoin anyway, but he's doing positive things about spreading the word for Bitcoin. Obviously, being MicroStrategy, putting their guts on the table and being the first sort of big mainstream blue chip company to have Bitcoin on the books is a good thing ultimately. So if it's done for taxes, then that's kind of fair.
Oh, come on. They had one good thing going for them. They were MicroStrategy. It was so simple. All they had to do was buy and hold. Now everything's all confusing. Victoria, what do you think about MicroStrategy changing their strategy?
Well, I can't say I'm all that surprised. I mean, as much as Michael Saylor is very clever and has built a very large business, he's kind of fallen into the trap that a lot of new Bitcoiners do. And that is, when you actually start to learn about the technology, it's like, there's no way that this is ever going down again. It's just so clever and it's the future of the world. And it's very easy to kind of get stuck in that mind trap. And as an individual, you believe that because you've figured it out, everyone else is going to figure it out as well. And at the same time, and of course, it doesn't actually work that way. And so what happens is, as other macroeconomic factors kind of come into play and other people's emotions come into play, inevitably the price goes down. And of course, you find yourself stuck in a situation that you never thought would happen. I mean, at the moment, I think the average price, even though he holds a lot of Bitcoins, the average price he's paid for them is around the region of like 30 grand. So, he's still lost half of his net worth half of the Bitcoin net worth based on what he bought them for. So as much as he puts a brave face on it because he has to, as part of the company, ultimately, he's made a bit of a boo-boo there by going all in so quickly. And who's to say that the rest of us haven't done it? I mean, I did exactly the same thing in 2018. I never thought it would go any lower, and you think everyone else who's saying it's going to go lower is a complete naysayer. And then before you know it, it's just like, unless I do something, I'm going to be in dire straits. And so you learn. And so what then happens is the next time there's a hype cycle, you've got more Bitcoiners in the space who understand how it works. And so the next time it starts to reach that point in the cycle, more people sell. And so this is what is going to reduce the amplitude, I think, of the price cycles as we go forward. I think as people wise up to how the technology works and how that influences the price cycle, you're going to get the savvy investors who sell at the top and buy at the bottom. And in traditional investing, it's not wise to do that. But because of the way in which the Bitcoin protocol works, you can absolutely do that if you've gone as far as to understand how it actually works. And so, next time Michael Saylor might be, he'll be saying exactly the same thing, but he'll have sold them last year rather than this year because he'll understand what he's doing next time. So
Michael Saylor's only had a fiat loss. 1 Bitcoin still equals 1 Bitcoin, right? Bonus question. What about Michael Saylor and the Lightning Network? MicroStrategy is going to offer Bitcoin Lightning solutions in 2023. Sounds like they'll even reward you for learning about Bitcoin. Josh Shigala, what do you think about MicroStrategy's getting into Lightning Network?
Yeah, I mean, Lightning is Bitcoin, so they should get into it. I don't really even understand what MicroStrategy does apart from holding Bitcoin. Like, I know that they've been around since the .com bubble. They even had an ad I think in the Super Bowl. I don't know. So they've been around for a long, long time. Back in the day, that was an ad in the Super Bowl during the 2008. Even earlier. When was the anyway? But they've pivoted and I don't know what they do. So I don't know what they will do with Lightning.
They do data analysis, don't they? That's one of the reasons why he's interested in it. So they, all those companies collecting your data behind web pages, he's one of those. And then he packages it and sells it on, because they want useful information. Other companies want useful information that they can get by analyzing people's data.
He's definitely been around a long time, Josh. I think he lost money in the original .com downturn. He would have been the ones telling you to buy pets.com. Dan, yeah. Eve, what do you think about Lightning Network and MicroStrategy?
Well, it actually makes me kind of sad because one of the statements is during the Twitter Spaces conversation, Saylor explained that chief marketing officers could potentially use the Lightning Network to incentivize customers, such as giving out Satoshi rewards for engaging in activities such as posting reviews and completing surveys. So basically, he's creating rewardportal.com. But under MicroStrategy. So I need to get back into that because it obviously validates the idea that you can use Lightning for micropayments for all sorts of social and other tasks. But I think it's a great idea, right? They've got BI, so MicroStrategy is, as Victoria said, is business intelligence. It's using data and packaging it and on for businesses to make to make better decisions. So why not be able to introduce some form of incentivization by using the Lightning Network? It makes perfectly good sense. And for someone who's such someone who's pro Bitcoin, why not make use of the technology in your existing infrastructure, especially if you are a software company? So yeah, I think it's a great idea overall, and it's kind of late coming. I think because to me that would have been one of the first things you do if you buy a load of Bitcoin is and you own a software company is start building some interesting infrastructure around Bitcoin, since you're so heavily invested and it's now what was $4 billion on their balance sheet and it's now $2 billion. So all good for the ecosystem. More development, more tools, the better.
Yeah. Victoria, I think Dan's onto something here. They're only finding out about the Lightning Network now.
Well, I think they are, but again, if you've spent any time on the Lightning Network, you'll realize how early it is. And so there's still a lot of bugs and issues to address. I mean, I think he's got absolutely the right idea. I think there's going to be several companies doing exactly the same thing in the coming few years. I think the only danger is it might be a little bit too early. But of course, the advantage of that is, you know, you get a chance to see what the bugs are early and fix them early. And also, you know, if you're a data harvester, he could certainly getting some mileage out of that as well. Not sure exactly how it works, but yeah, I think you're definitely on something there, Dan. So yeah, if I were Michael Saylor, that's exactly what I would be doing.
We also want to second what was said earlier. You got to be careful, Michael Saylor, when you have your whole stack of money and you get excited by an investment like Bitcoin and you just go all in with your millions and millions and millions of dollars. You might want a dollar cost average, you know, invest $1 million per week or $1 million per month, something like that. You might get a better deal in the long run. That's not financial advice, though. Moving on to issue 2. Mark Cuban wants to buy more Bitcoin, says that gold investors are dumb. Mark Cuban, previously a fan of ICOs, Ethernet, and even Ethereum, NFTs, everything, has now come along to Bitcoin. The founder of broadcast.com, who sold illegal basketball games on the internet to yahoo.com, is now back. Dan, Eve, should we welcome Mark Cuban back into the fold now that he's lost a little bit of money here and there?
Well, it's always good to see someone turn from the dark side, right? Someone who's historically shielded Ethereum and ICOs, actually realizing the potency of Bitcoin. He does make a good point, albeit a bit hardcore, about you know, when gold, if the world was to fall to the dust, as it were, and people had stocked their Bitcoin, their gold, then it's easy to just, you know, hit them with a lead pipe and steal their bar of gold. So it's all good, kind of hoarding that for Armageddon, in case you know, the fiat collapses and everything. But at least with Bitcoin, they'd have to steal the 12 words or 24 words from your head. But also just transacting in gold, like, you know, how would you even like give someone change if you had your gold bar, and like, you know, how do you give them half a gold bar of change? You know, that's probably going to be still quite difficult for the average Joe. So yeah, I think ultimately Bitcoin is, everyone said, as people have said, the new gold, but it's like gold on steroids times 50, because of the fact that it's so easy to hide your wealth. And although we've seen all these crazy stories of you know, the Bitfinex Bitcoin being found again, and some of the Silk Road Bitcoin being found again, you know, they were found due to kind of, what's the word, not complacency, but errors in the way the person had stored them, right? Putting them on a hard drive underneath the floorboards or something is a much worse way than having like 12 words discreetly written somewhere, that's, you know, extremely hard to find. So yeah, I think gold definitely is not as good as Bitcoin, and it's good to see that someone else who's an ICO shiller has turned to the light side.
I don't know about Cuban's example there. It seems like Bitcoin's only to get you more torture as they torture you to get your 12 or 24 words. At least with the gold bar, they just take it and run away. Victoria, what do you think about Mark Cuban suddenly joining up with Bitcoin and his strange thoughts about gold?
Well, I have to say, when I read the headline of this article, it did make me laugh. And my first thought was, well, he's not wrong. You know, I think, again, you know, part of the problem is, you know, the rest of the world doesn't always understand things the way that you understand them. And until the rest of the world catches up, you know, if they don't agree with you and they're all putting their money in gold, but you're the one putting your money in Bitcoin, then it's not going to work out for you. So in terms of the technology, you know, Dan's absolutely right. You know, it's definitely got some superior qualities compared to gold. But the thing is, at the moment, the banks still run the world. And in order for gold to work as a means of exchange, it needs the banks. And so ultimately, you know, Bitcoin will be the bank disruptor, but it needs to get to the stage where everybody understands that. And at the moment, it's still too many people are flummoxed by it. They don't understand it well. The fluctuations in the price is very disturbing. I mean, people are very emotionally attached to their money, and to see such huge swings in the price, it's just going to put people off even before they do anything else, unless they have a tendency towards high level risk. So, and there were a couple of other things there were a couple of things in the article that I felt weren't inaccurate. So one of the things he said was most digital coins don't derive their value from an underlying entity. And that's not actually true. The way in which the underlying software protocol has been written is all about their value. That's why we've got altcoins that are worth nearly zero, and Bitcoin is the most valuable. So the way in which they're programmed, how decentralized they are, especially if you compare Bitcoin with Ethereum, that all contributes to their value. But these are subtle distinctions that it takes quite a long time to learn and fully understand. And the general public are just not going to be there straight away. At the moment, you've got a core group of people who still understand aspects of it, but don't still miss some of these salient features. And so it's going to take a long time before the rest of the world catches up with that idea. But fundamentally, he's right. But that doesn't mean that Bitcoin's going to go to the top straight away. And the other thing they mentioned in the article, they kind of made a comparison between the fact that, gold's hardly lost its value this year, whereas Bitcoin's lost a lot of its value. I mean, gold's a $12 trillion market, whereas Bitcoin's only 318 billion at the moment. So, when you're dealing with a much bigger market compared to a smaller one, those comparisons aren't accurate. And so, sometimes you have to be careful. These articles can be quite misleading, and you need to understand the nuances of what they're trying to tell you. And sometimes you have to do further research just to get an accurate perspective just from one argument. So I like the headline. I thought some of the detail in the article needed a bit of work, but that's just my opinion.
Josh Segala, gold has certainly held up better than some of Mr. Cuban's ICOs, many of which went to zero. What do you think about him joining Bitcoin now?
I'm just like, for someone of his stature to call gold dumb, it is just dumb. And I'm sick of the battle between Bitcoin and gold. It's such a fake dichotomy. It's like such a bullshit dichotomy. It's a rare asset. If you have, it's Bitcoin versus fiat. It's Bitcoin gold versus fiat. If you can put your money and diversify into rare assets, that's the goal. Something that no single authority controls. Gold is great because it's decentralized in its issuance. It's found all around the world. It's 5,000 years old and been valued in different geographical regions that have nothing to do with each other. All of them value it. And so, yeah, okay. In a full shit hits the fan scenario, maybe it's not the best. But actually, Bitcoin's also not the best. I mean, it's barely the best now because of the network effect. It's kind of hard to find someone that will accept Bitcoin. Man, I try all the time. You want to accept Bitcoin for this? You want to accept any crypto? They're like, nah, just cash, thanks. Yeah, cash. Like, in a full shit hits the fan scenario, you know what the best money is? Whiskey. Whiskey is great. Everyone wants it. It's divisible. You want it if you're happy, if you're sad, and in a full shit hits the fan scenario, you're pretty sad. So you want to have a whiskey. Like this nonsense that these people trope around the place. Get over yourselves. Gold, it's not us versus gold. It's us versus fiat, and gold is part of us. So I just don't see it. I just think it's a dumb comparison. I'm sick of hearing about it. And like, I don't know. These people that come out of the woodwork, say they're all crypto, and then come out with nonsense like that, it means that they still don't understand it. JSE 1776 said it right.
Mark Cuban, only half welcome to the party by Josh. Only half. Moving on to the exit question, which will happen first? Will the price of Bitcoin hit $1 million? Or will Mark Cuban's Dallas Mavericks win the NBA championship again? Dan Eve, the championship or the $1 million?
I have no idea about the Dallas whatever they're called, the Dallas Cowboys.
They play basketball. It's a lot of handball. They use their hands.
I see. Well, I'm not going to try and jump for any hoops guessing that, as it were. So no pun intended. Okay, it was intended, and it was terrible. But it's the end of the year, so there's not going to be many more of those coming in 2022. I'm going to say Bitcoin $1 million.
Victoria, Bitcoin $1 million, or the basketball team wins. Puns are welcome.
Well, I know nothing about the team, so far be it from me to comment, but given that it sounds like they probably don't do very well, I'll go for Bitcoin at $1 million.
Looks like all Bitcoin so far. Josh Shigala, Bitcoin $1 million, or the Mavericks win.
$1 million to the moon.
Bad news from our Cuban. He needs to buy more players. Moving on, check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got 3,025 videos. You could watch them for 3 months, 14 days, 6 hours without sleeping. Moving on to issue 3, the upcoming Bitcoin halvening could have this effect on your holdings. Yes, it's the time of the year where we talk about nothing but the halvening for the next year and a half. Yes, the Bitcoin halvening is coming in March 2024, not 2023, but we're still going to talk about it all year long because the amount of Bitcoin being produced reduces from something around 6.5 to 3.25, an incredible reduction, as if half of the Bitcoin miners suddenly shut off. Thus, everyone thinks increasing the value of their Bitcoin. Victoria Jones, what do you think about the Bitcoin halvening? Only a year and a half away.
Well, I mean, a year and a half is still a long time. I mean, considering that we're an all-time high a year ago and everyone's bemoaning the fate of the Bitcoin bear market. I mean, it could be, we could be, I mean, I'd be surprised if we're higher. We're at a higher price this time next year than we are now. And I think we could go lower before that, because the thing is, all of the macroeconomic factors that are going on, I think, is going to have a part to play. So yes, the Bitcoin halvening, when we finally get there, will definitely make a difference with the price. But if you remember from 2020, I think the halving was in May, but it didn't actually reach the previous all-time high until towards the end of the year. So these things take a lot longer than people expect. And so, to constantly be on the edge of your seat, it's exhausting. It's just like buy a bit, set up a plan to buy some Bitcoin once a month and then go on and get on and do something else more interesting with your life. As fun as it is to talk about the price, but it is exhausting to constantly be monitoring the price charts and stuff.
Yes, but the kids in the back are kicking the seat. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Josh Shigala, the halvening's coming soon. Surely this will fix everything. Are we there yet?
Well, the Bitcoin halving, it's a cut above the rest. Hey, you wanted the puns. I'm really looking forward to it. And the funny thing about the Bitcoin halving is actually it's all priced in, right? Because everyone knows it's coming. But I think right now is when it starts pricing in. This is when they start to talk about it, when people are like, oh, okay. And when they learn about it, they're like, oh, so there's now going to be half as much. And so it's the time now to start, I think, not financial advice, but now is the time when people will start to price in the next halving. And then generally what happens is it's with miners, is it happens, the big boom happens about 6 months, like Victoria mentioned, about, or maybe less, 3 months or something like that after the halvening, that because miners have to hold, because Bitcoin, it's never enough to pay for the electricity. So they have to hold it until it's worth more, pay for the electricity. And if there's a halvening, then they have to hold it for longer. And that sort of spurs on a bit of a boost, and then other people pile into that boost and start buying, and you start getting these rockets. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, not only for the price pump, but what I like about the price pump when it happens is that all the businesses start to do well again. In terms of Bitcoin, like the startups in the space, the people hiring, the people building stuff start to showcase what they've built through the bear market. So yeah, halvening's coming. It's going to be exciting. Can't wait to talk about it every week.
Dan, Eve, surely this time it must be different. This time everyone knows that the halvening is happening, that it's coming, that it can't be changed, that no matter the economic conditions, the amount of Bitcoin being produced will go down by half.
Well, so historically the halvening, as there's always been a pump after the halvening, and before, I think one of the last articles we read a couple of weeks ago was how around the bottom is usually around 15 months prior to the halvening, which is pretty much like around about now. So there's certain rules that Bitcoin has kind of, the price has followed based on the halvening schedule. But I do think that from a slightly negative pessimistic perspective, if you think about like the halvening schedule, there's, the first halvening, there was 10.5 million Bitcoin mined when the halvening happened from 50 to 25 Bitcoin. And that was, so the actual, the percentage of supply, it was like 50% of the of this, 50% halvening, but there was only 10 million Bitcoin. So the impact of that halvening was quite significant, because the amount that was still being mined per day was quite a reasonable percentage of what the total floating supply was. Now, by the time you get to 2024, and we're at 3.125 Bitcoin per block, which is about 450 per day, that 450 as a percentage of supply is only 3.13%. So it makes it much less significant than the previous halvenings based on the current circulating supply, which will be around 96.99%. So that's kind of, I think that's why I think there's this is going to make a bit of a difference still, but I think maybe the difference kind of wanes over time, and that's when the fees start to take over, maybe as the kind of the bigger miner reward rather than the actual block reward, because it becomes such a significant the significance of the difference is lessened as the halvening goes on. I mean, the halvening after that in 2028 is going to be 1.56 Bitcoin per block, which is 225 per day, which is really insignificant because compared to the 98% of Bitcoin that would have been mined by that time. So I do think, as much as I believe in the halvening cycles, I think that the impact may drop a little bit. But also the fact is that the price of Bitcoin really needs to kind of keep doubling in order for the miners to stay kind of profitable. Because if the rewards halve and the miners, a bunch of miners go bust, etc., I think the price needs to be able to keep up with the decline in block rewards. Either that or the fee structure takes over. But we will see. We will see.
People have got to know Bitcoin are rare. They're getting rarer. And now it's your chance to pick against the Bitcoin predictor ball and predict the future. Let's see. Josh Shigala, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
It'll be higher. It'll be higher. We'll be higher.
Victoria Jones, higher or lower?
I suspect marginally higher.
Dan Eve, higher or lower? Everyone's pretending to be optimistic, but only for a week.
I am going higher as well, actually. Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a high. But then I think we'll probably dip a bit by the January because of taxes and stuff.
Hedging like a weathercaster. He's all over the place. Here we go. Shaking the ball could cause bubbles. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? My sources say no. My sources say no. The ball remains pessimistic despite you puny humans and your optimism. Moving on to issue 4, back to FTX. Caroline Ellison, the former Alameda chief, and Gary Wang, FTX co-founder, each pled guilty to multiple charges, perhaps hundreds of years of jail time, and are now cooperating with the feds against Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried has been taken to the United States, quickly fitted with a ankle bracelet, and then released to his parents so he could have a Merry Christmas at home in California. A top SEC official is stepping down following controversial meetings with Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX lobbyists. Alameda wallets have just become active days after the bail. Dun dun dun. Could be trouble there as the wallets are now moving millions of dollars around. And Sam Bankman-Fried welcomes quote unquote sexy crypto journalist while under house arrest. Tiffany Wang has visited Sam at home in California to get the real story in person for you. Josh Shigala, what do you think about all these amazing updates on the FTX story?
Yeah, it's there's so much rot, political rot, and such, and so it's I'm really hoping that some of that political rot will come out through the process, but I also doubt it. It's interesting that the judge in the case is apparently the same judge that did the Ghislaine Maxwell. Or was it Jeffrey Epstein?
I think that it's the attorney for Sam is the same as Ghislaine Maxwell. The judge, fascinating enough, as we have more fun facts for this case, she put up the $250 million bail, which seemed absurd that he was even getting offered bail. Then she quickly resigned because her husband had worked for a case involving FTX. So minor
the
conflict.
New judge, apparently the new judge is was the one in charge of Epstein or something like that as well. I don't know, but anyway, let's see how much comes out in the wash. I really, when I read stuff about the SEC and some of these regulators in bed, and this is why it's DeFi is so important. This is why decentralized finance for me is really a big important step towards building something better, because humans are fallible. Humans will cave generally to corruption, most 99.99% of the time. So even if there's high level regulators who are called Your Honor everywhere and Your Excellency judges, all of these people can be corrupted. And when Sam ran this huge Ponzi scheme and had billions of dollars, you can really just pay off anybody. I mean, someone that's earning 200K at the most as a judge or whatever it is, you throw a couple of million at them, they're doing what you want. And that goes for regulators as well. If you can make baits in there, and that's what Sam did. And it's what really frustrates me though is they'll say like, oh, he stepped down, like that's like some sort of awful thing for him. What? He lost his job. I think the guy deserves a little bit more sort of heavy-handed stuff than just losing his job. I mean, yeah. So I hope what will happen through these court cases and through the Twitter files and through all of the stuff that's happening, that we start to get some real deep understanding of how far the tentacles of FTX went, and as well how much corruption and how much rot there is throughout the entire system.
Well, unfortunately, Josh, I think you're going to find the corruption on both sides, as SBF has said he donated to Republicans as well, although through quiet back channels. So I think they're both going to be corrupt there. I think he was maybe trying to get this regulation as a defense against new competitors. So smaller players on the market would have to jump through regulatory hoops that a large player like FTX with an army of lawyers and so forth could get by. The thing I really worry about is the potential for Gary Wang and Caroline Ellison, whoever else goes in ratting against Sam, for them to get off relatively scot-free. It's interesting that Caroline said, oh, I feel bad, and oh, I took the money, and oh, I knew it was wrong. But we're talking about billions of dollars of people's life savings. If she gets 3 years, if she gets 5 years, it doesn't much matter if Sam gets 250 years if we're letting everybody else go. Dan Eve, Gary Fong went to math camp with Sam in high school. He was his college roommate. And Sam said, Gary is scared. And now Gary has gone rat, along with his ex-girlfriend.
Well, I think the situation sucks in general for a lot of people that lost a lot of money in FTX. I see him walking around, fair enough, he's got an ankle bracelet on, but he's sat in a multi-million-dollar home. He gets to have the internet. Fair enough, he's saying, I feel sorry for what I've done, which is, lesson 101 about showing remorse, to get a lighter sentence or whatever. But the fact is that he ran a very messed up operation. And the idea that Caroline and Ellison and Wang can Gary Wang can essentially become snitches and get lighter sentences, even though they did pretty much the same crimes, right? The three of them did. They're all tried for, I think, bar a few different other crimes that SBF is are added to his sheet. They all did pretty much the same thing. I mean, they're all running, they knew exactly where the funds came from, where they were going. They're all complicit with it. There's, this new craziness that funds are moving around from Alameda. Obviously people speculating that SBF, because he doesn't have any restriction on the internet or anything, he can still interact with the outside world. He's the one that's moving those funds, and he seems like such a brazen, cocky kind of guy, having done his round of interviews, that it sounds quite unlikely that he would be the sort of guy to be like, well, I'm just going to move the money and fuck it. Will they find out? I don't know. Who cares? That sort of thing. Or I'm going to jail anyway, so I might as well funnel the money off. Let's face it, he used things like Heo Services, whoever it was, used Change Now and Fixed Float. So he could be siphoning money. It could be obviously siphoning money to be able to pay off certain people in certain places before he goes down and his internet is taken out. So I really don't think you can trust him. And the more I look back and watch those interviews, like the one where the guy's like, this is Sam Bankman-Fried, he's like a really generous billionaire, and he like gives him $100 or something, the more seedy the whole thing looked. And I thought, I look back and I'm like, oh my god, I literally was suckered in by the fact that this guy could actually be a nice guy. Like he's just the same as everyone else. And he drove around in a Toyota Prius or whatever it was and sniffs his own farts and all that. The fact is that, or is that just in South Park? The fact is that he's a very shady character, and he screwed with a lot of people's money. And so it's very sad to see him with these kind of light restrictions. And I also read that the 10% of the 250 million, which should have been 25 million, he didn't post the full amount. I'm sure I read that ended up being just his parents' house and someone else's house, maybe a family member's house, that was put up for the bond. And so he didn't even need to meet that requirement. Like the guy's like a complete fraudster, and very evidently so by his own admission, mixing customer funds. So was it the CoffeeZilla podcast? So it's just a sad situation, really. Whether or not the fact is, regardless of who he donated to, we need to stop this corruption. I mean, I don't live in the US, but I'm sure as hell it happens over here. But there needs to be more transparency with politicians and donations, because it's very clear from the outside, or at least it very much looks that way, that the outside, that politicians still can be very much bought, and that's not how politics should work. No politician should be able to be bought. They should be making the decisions based on the right, for the right of the people, not the right of themselves, and enriching their own lives. So very, very bad Sam Bankman-Fried, very bad Gary Wang, and very bad Caroline Ellison. I hope you all go to jail for being naughty.
Well, unfortunately in the U.S. here, Dan, with the Citizens United decision, corporations have been given the right to speech, and speech now includes money. So there's pretty much unlimited corporate money in our system. So that would have to be changed before we could even try to control corporate speech. But what about this? Sam Bankman-Fried steals everyone's pension, steals all the money, kind of laughs about it, wears a t-shirt and shorts the whole time, and now he's been visited at home by beautiful cryptocurrency journalists. Victoria, what do you think about Sam Bankman-Fried and the easy times he's had since he's been arrested, had the nice jail room in Bahamas, got to go to his parents' house in the US? Seems pretty sweet.
Got vegan food.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing just smells terrible, doesn't it, really? And I mean, when I heard about Carolyn and Gary kind of caving, I was just like, these guys, considering they were meant to be running the best crypto exchange on the planet, are clearly not very smart. They've never studied game theory. I mean, like the number one in game theory is the prisoner's dilemma. You know, you don't rat out the other person if you want to survive. I mean, these people are I just don't believe that this sophisticated setup was run by these three. I think they're puppets. I think there's way, way, way more to this than any of us realize, because they're clearly really weak characters and not very smart. You know, I think they were just set up as the fall guys. I think there's something much deeper, much bigger going on. And if they're going to investigate anything, I hope they get to the bottom of it. But, you know, evidence suggests they're not going to. I mean, you know, they can arrest and prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell, but there were a whole host of other people involved with Jeffrey Epstein, you know, and what was going on there. And we've not seen anything else, you know, connected to that. So I don't have much faith. I mean, I think they've just been set up as the fall guy. And it's like over Christmas, I watched National Treasure again with my family. And of course, at the end, the CIA guy goes, "Someone has to go to prison, Ben." So, you know, they may not be their perpetrators, but as long as they've got someone for everyone to project their hate at, then whoever's getting away with it behind the scenes is happy about that. And I actually feel sorry for these kids. I think they've been completely set up. They were completely unprepared for this position. Yes, they've done bad things and they didn't have a strong enough moral character to say no and not get involved with it. But God knows what's happened to them in their past, which has resulted in that. I mean, I think the whole thing's just a complete tragedy for them and everyone else who's lost money as a result of them. And, you know, the entire industry, I mean, the only blessing in this situation is the fact that it's happened now rather than further along down the line. And this gives an opportunity for people to see exactly the kind of corruption that happens with these organized systems, because, you know, what's happening on this exchange is similar to what's happened with other banks in the past, like Enron and you know, the other Bernie Madoff or whatever. So, you know, these things aren't unique to crypto. They're, you know, it's part of the problem with money. And so, you know, if it's going to be successful, we need to clean up our act. And, you know, I'm glad it's been brought down, and they're, you know, they're at least having a show of putting people to justice. But, you know, I think the justice will be very shallow based on evidence so far.
Well, I still think the simplest solution might be the best one, and that's that they're just idiots. If you look at average intelligence, that means half the people are dumber than average intelligence. I don't think they'd ever heard about the prisoner's dilemma. I don't think they'd ever seen movies or good mob movies that would have helped them work through these ideas in their mind. And I don't think they tried to stick together at all. If you look at that strange interview where Sam Bankman-Fried says, Gary is worried. Gary is afraid. He knows his buddy's worried, yet he's not over there comforting him. He's having these ridiculous Twitter spaces on the internet, and we don't know anything about Caroline except the strange blog interview she gave. But other than that, she seems very sharp, probably got a hold of herself quick, and was up there trying to rat out her boyfriend and just ride this thing out, you know, just rat him out till the end. So I don't know. I think they should receive significant punishment as well. You can't just be driving this car at the front and then say, well, he was driving. We had nothing to do with it. They were right there the whole time. Exit question, predict the future. Will we see a Sam Bankman-Fried trial? Will he run? Will other things happen to him? Josh Segala, predict the future.
I don't think he'll run. I think there's too many cameras pointed at him. I think, but I do agree with Victoria. I think they are really, they're not clever. Sam, if you ever see him, he's like this shaking mess from all the pills he's popping all the time. I just don't think he's, you know, I also agree. I think there's something a lot more. I'm not to say that they're not guilty, that they shouldn't be punished, because they're obviously smarter than just absolute patsies, but there is some bigger hands holding those puppet strings, I think, and playing this full game. Yeah. I don't know. Mr. Wonderful, there's stuff behind him, and he would have brought people in. Sequoia, how did these guys get all that funding? It just, none of it has ever made sense. None of it has ever made sense. How this thing came in 2017 through a bear market, became so big after 2017. Sorry, when it started collapsing, and they got so big over that time. I don't understand it. Mostly Ponzi mechanics, but yeah, crazy.
There is this kind of amazing thing where people don't ask the basic questions. If you can get past a certain stage where no one's asked the basic questions to you, you just sneak right by. I don't want to get too political here, but we have a situation in the U.S. where a soon-to-be congressperson, he's been elected, George Santos, has lied about his basic resume. He said he worked for these companies. He didn't work for them. He said his religious background was Jewish. Now he's saying it's Jew-ish. So if anyone had done basic, and it's just absurd, Josh. I mean, he's just on his face. It's a liar. It's not a political question. It's just, he was dishonest. And if anyone had done the basic opposition research, he also said he graduated from a college he didn't graduate from. It's very obvious, but no one picked up the phone and called that college. No one picked up the phone and called those corporations and said, hey, did this guy work here? These years from this, we got him running for Congress, nobody did that. And it's shocking that no one did that, but it's also incredibly possible. Like, obvious mistakes are sometimes the hardest ones to avoid. A lot of these people, Sequoia or whatever, they said, oh, we figured the other company did the due diligence. We figured the other company did it. And yes, it sounds very stupid, especially when they're investing millions of dollars of clients' money. But these kind of stupid things happen. Dan Eve, predict the future. What will happen next in FTX, the soap opera?
Well, I'd like to think that there's going to be I personally do think that the SBF and his co-conspirators were just kind of naive kids that, and I've seen many of them along the way, that like kids that just became multi-millionaires overnight, not billionaire level, but and they kind of just didn't know what to do with the money and how to really work, how to really be safe with it, and to have. It sounds like they didn't even have FTX didn't even have like a finance department, or something. I'm pretty sure I read something ridiculous like that. So they're a company that grew very. There you go. So they grew really fast, and they didn't have the infrastructure in place in terms of AML procedures and all of that, which made them fail ultimately, because they probably arrogantly thought to themselves, we can deal with it. So I think it's very much a meteoric rise and then an arrogant level of stupidity that led to all these blunders, and just we'll get away with it. We've got our hands in politicians' pockets on both sides, so we're definitely covered. We've got like those are the insurance policies. They've paid up so many people. I think you made a good point about the fact that once someone big goes in, other people don't tend to do research. And when I was sucking into ICOs in like 2017, the first thing you'd ask is like, oh, is who's invested in them? Is the 3 Arrow Capital in them or whatever, and as soon as someone hears a name, you'd hear people just like ape in and be like, oh, cool, well, they must have done the due diligence, so there's no point in us doing it. And that's how we saw a lot of people get very close to SBF, politicians and people in the regulatory alike. I mean, Gensler himself, would be interested to see what his links are, because I'm sure he's linked via Stanford or something like that, or MIT, by relatives or something that seems like he could be not necessarily in any way involved, but maybe his involvement would lead him to kind of be end up in the shit about it. But it just sounds like it seems like if Wang and Ellison snitch in, they'll get reduced sentences, so they could end up coming out of this quite lightly, which would be sad, because they, as you said, they've got pretty much the same charges. But there's got to be other dominoes that are going to fall with this. Three people falling. This is a big kind of case for the industry, right? It's the biggest crypto scam in history. So there's going to be, like they made an example of Charlie Shrem back in the day. They're going to be going after blood. So it'd be interesting to see what the domino effect of this is, and how this cascades out, and the ripples we see any other people kind of going down from regulatory perspective, or politicians, especially if it's true about hiding dirty money. This could be like a big kind of tsunami event rather than just a wave.
Well, Gensler is connected to the whole mess. He was taught by Ellison's father. So Ellison's father was also a professor. He was kind of a mentor to Gensler. But again, that doesn't mean complete corruption or whatever. And the interesting, I thought as well, Dan, is that they didn't just pay off the U.S. politicians on both sides. They also paid off the Bahamas government. And remember, during the initial phases of the collapse, the people that were allowed to withdraw their money were the people in the Bahamas, which everybody giggled to themselves and laughed. They're like, oh yeah, that's really smart. You want to make sure those people are happy, because they could come and get you in person. So they are at least smart enough to do that. We'll have to see how it goes in the end. Victoria, I guess, exit question to you. What do you think about the future of SBF and the exciting soap opera we've had so far?
Well, I reckon there'll be a big case that gets worldwide attention, and Sam Bankman-Fried will go down for several years. And then a few months after that, we'll all be debating on Twitter how Sam Bankman-Fried didn't kill himself.
Oh, come on. Just because it happened once doesn't mean it'll happen again. I think it's more likely, thinking about the way things go, there'll be a QuickBooks commercial in Sam Bankman-Fried's future, and he'll say, I ran $1 billion Ponzi, alleged Ponzi, on QuickBooks. QuickBooks is good enough. And they'll talk about all the great features QuickBooks have, and we'll say, how could that happen? How could they just let him back in and Mr. Wonderful invest for a new company for him? But we're running out of time. Josh Segal, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
No, I really don't have any stories where, the stories, I've just been actually taking a little bit of a break for the last week, 2 weeks, and I'm really looking forward to getting back and hitting the year running around January, 5th or 6th or 7th, and I'm just really enjoying powering up, recharging the batteries.
And you're all the way in down under, where hamburgers walk on their feet and the water runs the different direction and all that stuff.
Yeah.
A Merry Christmas to all and a Happy New Year. Dan,
yeah, absolutely.
Dan, what do you have? A prediction or a story of the week? We're getting to the end of the year.
Okay. So the end of the my prediction is I'm with Victoria on this. I think that he's got his fingers in a lot of dirty pies, and he's going to be found in his cell choked on a vegan sausage or something crazy like that. Or maybe he just manages to pay everyone else off and gets broken out of his cell or something.
I think morally he might want to do it to himself. I don't think it's a big conspiracy. I think it's more of a moral issue when one realizes what's happened to oneself. Whereas in the other case, the person didn't really have those kind of potential morals. This is still a young kid. He just took their money. He didn't do all the other stuff.
I think that if he gets something crazy sentenced like 100 years or something, then he's I don't think he's gonna. It depends kind of what prison he ends up in, right? But he doesn't seem like the sort of kid that's gonna, you can't really imagine him like coming out tops in like the Shawshank Redemption, in amongst the prison folk. Who's he gonna go and hang out with in his orange jumpsuit? There's got to, the hacker nerds or something like that. There's got to be, apart from that, I don't know. He's not going to fit in very well, and I think, he might Epstein himself. Nobody knows.
John McAfee also seemed like a really tough guy, but he didn't want to tough it out in prison. I think it's interesting. Dan thinks it would be because of the 100 years. I think it would be because of the psychological pressure of losing so many people's fortunes. Other people seem to think it would be because of the conspiracy or so forth. Victoria, a story of the week or a prediction? Go ahead.
I'll go with the story. So I've been on quite a few podcasts lately. So I was on one with Daniel Prince, who runs the Once Bitten podcast, and his most recent interview is with Michael Saylor. So I felt in very esteemed company there. And I've just done another one, which was 4 hours long, but it's not going to be released until March. So so I'm starting to ramp up, some of the podcast interviews, which, is very exciting. So we'll just see where that develops.
All right, and I think we're ready for a new year. This is going to be our last show of the year. We tried to cram as many shows as we could to the end there. Check out our year-end spectacular last week. We predicted everything and told you about the past year. And then even for more fun, you could go back a year and see the prediction special where we're all happy, where we're like, oh, there's advertisements about Bitcoin on TV and it's good, and NFTs are good, and everything was great last year. So hopefully we'll turn around next year. And if not, we'll be here saying the same thing about the halvening in about a year. So thanks to everybody for giving us a thumbs up and subscribing down below. Until next time, bye-bye.